Is it true that ATCs are so rare that only 2 or 3 people in Canada have one? Model 617, Model 29 with prohib weapons. I feel you need a handgun for protection. 44 Magnum, this will stop an animal attack. If I don't have a handgun, isn't it now impossible to buy one? Accuracy and time required to shoot pivots often. For wilderness protection ATC, why you don't just carry bear spray. Data tends to include only real attacks with serious intent on part of the animal. I set this up so that we'd have a little introduction on the authorization to carry. Preceding this, just to give you an idea of the topics that are going to be covered. There's more than shown in the introduction, but that's some of them. And from this point on, now we're going to go into the in-depth explanation covering those topics and many more. So it'll be about a half an hour video, I think, and I'll put in timestamps on it. Without further ado, I think we should just get into this and see what this is all about. Can you have an authorization to carry in Canada? What are the conditions? Get you at the end. Okay, I'm back again, back at home, out of the cold, into a nice warm house. So let's continue. First, a quick obligatory disclaimer. As someone who's had an ATC for several years, this video is based on my personal research and understanding of the relevant regulations. The information in this video should not, however, be regarded as legal advice. For confirmation on any points explained here, contact your provincial CFO's office directly or obtain the services of a lawyer, and I recommend in Runkle of the Bailey from Edmonton. Check the description of this video in case any corrections have been needed afterwards or to reflect changes in regulations. And also, I'd like to add how to support this channel quickly. I spent quite a few hours researching and writing the script for this video, plus many more in post-production. So if you'd be so kind, click like and subscribe. YouTube's super thanks button is shown below, and buy me a coffee link is provided in the description. Sharing your thoughts in the comments section also helps a great deal in terms of encouraging the YouTube algorithm to recommend this video to more people. So to begin with, what is this thing called an ATC? An ATC is short for Authorization to Carry, a permit issued in Canada authorizing its holder to carry a handgun in a non-concealed manner, either for dispatching trapped animals on a trap line or to provide protection from wildlife wherever such threats may exist. Is it true that ATCs are so rare that only 2 or 3 people in Canada have one? This is a very common misconception based on confusing the extremely rare instances of ATCs issued for concealed carry, given to persons whose lives are under such serious threat that the police admit they cannot ensure their protection. Yeah, there are probably only 2 or 3 of those, but the number of ATCs issued for dispatch and wilderness protection in Canada actually number in the hundreds and are not at all rare or impossible to obtain, given you meet the requirements. What kinds of ATCs are available? There are 2 kinds. Number 1, dispatch ATC. Dispatch ATC can be issued for 22 handguns used to dispatch animals caught in traps by licensed trappers. So this here is a model 617 Smith & Wesson 22 caliber, holds 10 rounds. That's what you would use typically for dispatching trapped animals. Number 2, there's the Wilderness Protection ATC. A Wilderness Protection ATC can be issued for a handgun used to protect oneself from attack by large, dangerous animals while working in the wilderness. This ATC is not restricted to only trappers, as we'll explain further in the video. So here, for example, is Model 29 with an extremely large barrel. This is the one I normally carry. You can actually go as low as a 357 Magnum. The Model 29 is a 44 mag. And this one is actually a prohib weapon, so you need a 12.6. But if you have a 12.6 license and are allowed to possess prohibited handguns, there's no problem at all getting it okayed for wilderness protection carry. Okay, let's carry on. What if, as a hunter or hiker, I feel I need a handgun for protection? You may legitimately feel you do, but you cannot obtain an ATC to support recreational activity because ATCs are only issued to persons engaged in lawful occupations, ones requiring they work in the wilderness where animal attacks, threats exist. This may seem totally unfair, but it is the Canadian law. Okay, what if I decide that protecting myself and perhaps my family trumps what the law demands and decide to carry a handgun anyway without authorization? Consider the many ways you could be caught, which might include your handgun being discovered after being involved in an accident, let's say, or being stripped down in a hospital after having a health emergency. Could happen, right? Plus, there are many other possible scenarios. The charges that could be laid against you are serious and are unauthorized possession. If you possess a handgun without a license, you could face up to 5 years in prison. Carrying a concealed weapon. This offense carries a fine of $5,000 and up to 10 years in prison. Possession for dangerous purposes. Also a $5,000 fine and up to 10 years in prison. Plus, not being allowed to own firearms again, perhaps for life. In addition, consider the legal fees involved defending yourself in court that could ruin you financially. Instead of taking such a high risk, consider alternatives like bear spray or a short-barreled but still legal mare's leg or a shotgun instead. Here's for an example. This is a mare's leg, very powerful, 44 Magnum. This will stop an animal attack, but it is heavy. I've seen guys make holsters for them and carry them on their hip, and I've tried carrying it on my hip too just to see what it's like. And yeah, it's heavy, but if you're a bow hunter or something like that, or with your family and you don't want to carry a big long arm, this can be quite effective. And I have, with practice, you can shoot it fairly accurately, surprisingly so. So that's something else to consider. Maybe better than always looking over your shoulder and worrying about getting caught, right? I don't recommend that. In the case of outdoors people, what are some examples of lawful occupations that an ATC may be issued for? You could have trappers, hunting guides, prospectors, ranchers in grizzly country. I think I've heard of them getting issued an ATC. Wildlife photographers, I know of a person who was a wildlife photographer who obtained an ATC for that. And another one would be providing security for work crews in remote areas. I've heard of that as well. So these are all lawful occupations where they can demonstrate a need for providing protection for themselves or for others. If I don't have a handgun or one suitable for an ATC, isn't it now impossible to buy one due to the recent OIC order in council banning transfers of handguns? The OIC applies to handguns, though, used for recreational use. So as long as you obtain an ATC, you can still purchase a handgun for work, i.e. something suitable for wilderness protection or dispatch. After all, if that weren't possible, armored guards wouldn't be able to buy handguns, right? So there is an exception for guns used for work. Does location matter where you intend to carry the handgun? Yes, and depending on the CFO, it's important that the work location be remote, where you are less likely to encounter people. This may impact issuance to trappers wishing to work on private land close to habitations. In the case of a wilderness protection ATC, the location must be one where actual danger is present. You may have to prove to the CFO that you have conducted your own research, proving animals present a danger in the area you are applying for. Some animals falling into that category include bison, bears, wolves, cougar, and moose. What is required for a trapper to obtain a wilderness protection ATC? In the case of trappers, the most common scenario is for those who trap in a registered fur management area in a remote location. RFMAs, the registered fur management areas, are basically dispositions issued by the government to provide exclusive rights for harvesting natural resources, including animal fur, from ground land, just like dispositions are given for logging, mining, and oil extraction. How do you become a trapper qualified to apply for an ATC? In Alberta, you must take a 3-day course and obtain a trapper's license before being allowed to trap. Once you have a trapping license, you can trap on private land with permission from the owner, or be signed on as a junior under the supervision of a senior trapper who has a registered fur management area. It is more likely you will be deemed eligible for an ATC when you trap on an RFMA in a remote region. How does one obtain a registered fur management area? Almost all RFMAs are already registered to a senior trapper. So you either have to find an RFMA that has been released back to the province, or find one that a senior is willing to relinquish to you. This is done by having him or her sign a government form. Relinquishing a trapline usually involves some form of monetary compensation given to the current senior, and that amount can be very high depending on the intrinsic value of the trapline and the infrastructure existing on the RFMA. For example, trapping cabins, bridges built. There are instances where seniors have received upwards of $250,000 for relinquishing their trapline, but others where only a few $1,000s were involved. When money changes hands in this scenario, the government is not involved in enforcing any agreement you make, however. So a degree of trust must exist beforehand, established either personally or somehow legally. Be aware that even after the senior has relinquished the trapline, the government, it still has the final say on whether the RFMA will be transferred to you. After relinquishment, what are the criteria the government takes into account when deciding if the RFMA will become yours? The government will need to see evidence you have a minimum of 3 years trapping experience, preferably under the supervision of a senior trapper. If the trap line is located in a region with a long history of Indigenous trapping, the government may be reluctant to approve the transfer if you're not Indigenous. Provincial authorities are on the watch for trap lines being swooped up by people who have no intention of using them for trapping, and they will remove the RFMAs from such people. So don't misuse the trap line for things like starting a hunting lodge or a vacation resort. It's not going to work out good for you. How do you keep an RFMA once you have one? Once you have an RFMA, you must pay an annual $40 license fee to the government for renewal, which isn't much, right? You may have to demonstrate that you're actually trapping, or at least trying to, on the trap line to retain your RFMA. An RFMA, once you have it, is something you can sign over to future generations of your family if they wish to continue its operation, assuming they have sufficient trapping experience to qualify. And finally, the senior trapper is the only one who can relinquish an RFMA. Juniors on the trap line have no say in the matter. Compared to rifles, aren't handguns kind of useless for stopping large animal attacks? Nothing is guaranteed, but North American statistics have shown that many lives have been saved through the use of high-powered handguns for protection. Rifles are also effective, but have shortcomings in the following areas. They are often not in hand and quick enough to deploy, especially for people working in the bush where they need both hands free. And a handgun may still be deployable even after an animal has you down on the ground and is in the process of mauling you. When it comes to accuracy and time required to shoot, critics often overlook the fact that a handgun is not just to protect yourself. A handgun may be needed to protect persons with you, assuming an animal chooses that person to attack first, which could leave you with more time. How frequently can you carry your handgun? In the case of ATCs for dispatch, my understanding is only while you are involved in checking your traps to see if you have caught something. So it might not be allowed while simply setting the traps initially. In the case of ATCs for protection, however, any time while you are working in the area the ATC is valid for. In the case of trappers, that can be any time you are on your trap line, since supporting its operation is a full-time job and threats can arise anytime, anywhere, as I have found myself. When can you not carry your handgun for wilderness protection? You have to abide by the law regarding the transport of restricted firearms, which requires trigger locking the gun and putting it inside a lock case while traveling in a motorized vehicle. Travel via dog sled and perhaps canoe may be exempt from what I've been told. When retiring to bed at night, you have to trigger lock the gun and put it inside an opaque locked case. While in the region your ATC applies to, are you allowed to use your handgun for target shooting? In the case of a wilderness protection ATC, you are not allowed to draw the gun from your holster or discharge it unless you perceive yourself or others are in danger of being attacked by an animal. In the case of a dispatch ATC, you can only discharge your handgun if you need it to end the life of a trapped animal. If you have a 12-6 PAL and own a prohibited handgun, i.e. short-barreled handgun, can that be used for an ATC? And as sort of mentioned just briefly in passing already, yes you can. It's no different than obtaining an authorization for a non-prohibited restricted firearm. Can you have ATCs for more than one handgun? Yes, but you can only carry one at a time on your person. Realistically, have you ever been in a situation where you felt you needed a handgun? The answer to that, in my case, is yes. But that does not mean I actually drew the handgun from my holster. Two examples I can think of were encountering a cougar at very close range when stepping out of the cabin, and I mean really close, enough to put my hand on his back. And also in case of one or more bears in the bush circling my campfire in the dark late at night. Under which circumstances might a handgun for protection be needed? Moose can be unpredictable and deadly. Bears may appear even in midwinter. Cougars often follow people in predatory fashion and can be especially dangerous to small children if they're around. And we do bring our grandkids and even a great-grandchild to the trap line with us. What kind of handguns are qualified for wilderness protection? Okay, the handgun should have power sufficient to stop an attack by a large animal. So that requires at least a 41 or 44 Magnum or 357 Magnum as a minimum, or 10mm semi-auto will work as well. 9mm semi-autos are deemed to not have sufficient stopping power for protection, so you're not getting ATC for one of those guns, at least not in Alberta. What handgun do you recommend? Okay, I recommend a 41 or 44 Magnum revolver for the following reasons. I don't trust the reliability of a semi-auto after being exposed to the elements, snow, rain, and extreme cold. It's easier to find ammunition suitable for stopping big game in the case of revolver cartridges. The advantages of concealability are not needed for open carry. And finally, Magnum handguns with more recoil than a 44 Magnum, which are around, tend to be very inaccurate in the hands of most shooters. Even a 44 mag is quite a handful already. Is it difficult to justify to the CFO your need for carrying a handgun when it comes to wilderness protection? It can be, depending on the CFO. Providing evidence of the animals presenting risk in your work area will help in that, however. What are some points you may have to address when asked about your need for a handgun? You will be asked why you don't just carry bear spray. The bear spray topic is somewhat of a nuisance that can be countered, stating you do not trust bear spray to stop an attacking animal. This is for good reason, as statistics praising bear spray are skewed by irrelevant incidents that include deterring bears that are simply curious. And then they count that as a successful defense. Whereas handgun protection cases, the data tends to include only real attacks with a serious intent on the part of the animal to injure or kill. Wind conditions and reliability of bear spray canisters in extreme conditions can also be cited as factors for not wanting to rely on bear spray. So remember that the choice of a handgun for protection is your right to choose over bear spray. Does obtaining an ATC involve a lot of paperwork? Yes, but once you've gone through the process once, you can refer to copies of your previously approved applications as a reference when renewing in the future, making it much simpler. Make sure to provide all documentation possible to the CFO to make their decision-making process easier and in your favor. Where do you get the forms for applying? Well, just contact your provincial CFO to obtain the latest version of the application, specifying which one you need, whether it's dispatch or wilderness protection. They are different forms. What else is involved besides paperwork? Although this may vary from province to province, you will likely have to pass a Proof of Proficiency exam. The POP, as it's known, will require you to obtain the services of a recognized firearms trainer, tester, or range officer to conduct the test, recording the results of your test on a form supplied by the CFO. How difficult is it to pass the Proof of Proficiency test? From what I hear, few people actually fail the test. But that is not to say that it is easy. You get 3 times on passing each shooting distance of the test, and if you fail all 3 times for any distance, you will have to wait 30 days before retaking the entire test. If while drawing your handgun from your holster or any time while shooting you transgress safety requirements, the examiner is obliged to fail you on the spot. For this reason, you should consider hiring a trainer for proper holster use before taking the test. For dispatcher's ATC 22 handgun, you'll be required to shoot 6 shots with accuracy at 3 different distances using the handgun you want the authorization for. For a wilderness protection ATC, you'll be required to shoot 6 shots with accuracy at targets placed at 3 distances, 5, 10, and 15 meters as I recall, and do so within a 20-second time limit that includes the time required to unholster your gun. Depending on the province, you may be required to repeat the same test from a kneeling position as well. Alberta requires a kneeling stage. Many shooters of Magnum handguns have developed a flinch, which can cause them to fail, so extensive proper practice beforehand is advised. Come to the test with sufficient ammunition. You should have enough to take the test 3 times if necessary. After all, you're paying for it, right? For example, you will need at least 3 times 6 shots for the 3 distances, and an additional 3 times 6 shots for the kneeling position, and then 3 times that in total for your maximum of 3 tries. So that could amount to 180 rounds of ammunition, so just keep that in mind. Why does a proficiency test include shooting from the kneeling position? This is probably due to the fact that if the surrounding terrain and time permits, you're less likely to shoot over the back of a charging animal that's rapidly closing the distance on you when you're lowered down to its height and shooting straight up the pipe from a kneeling position. How long is an ATC valid for? That depends on the province, but in Alberta, the first ATC you obtain is good for only 1 year before having to renew. Each year after that, you can obtain one good for 2 years before having to renew. Besides submitting paperwork, renewal also involves passing the Proof of Proficiency exam again. What kind of holster are you required to use? The holster shall not have the trigger exposed and must be designed to latch the handgun in place to prevent it from falling out accidentally, yet still be something you can draw out quickly if needed. Can you use a cross draw or shoulder holster? No. The holster has to be constructed to not conceal and, in other words, be over top your clothing, and it has to hang on your strong side hip. Make sure the belt is long enough on your holster to go around the outside of a parka for Canadian conditions. The holster may have a speed loader pouch added for faster revolver reloads. Can you use a holster you make yourself? Yes, in fact, that is something you may have to do because there's really not many choices, it seems, available in Canada for Magnum revolvers. Is obtaining training beforehand a good idea? And I would say yes to that, because the requirements of rapid firing a Magnum handgun for protection differs from the usual type of handgun shooting performed at gun ranges using semi-autos most often. For example, you have to lean forward while shooting to keep the repeated heavy recoil of the gun from walking you back and making you reset your stance. And you want to have a stance that permits you some agility if all else fails, so you can sidestep an animal charging at you. While rapidly drawing the handgun from your holster, the examiner is going to be watching like a hawk that you do not allow the muzzle to even briefly cross one of your limbs. So just keep that in mind. So that covers everything I could think of based on the questions I most commonly hear. This channel, as mentioned before, we have like around 43 videos, I think, on authorization to carry. So make sure to subscribe and check out the playlist. There's a playlist called Authorization to Carry. We'll put a link to that onto the end screen of this video. I also have a holster, the holster that I've made, which is a very good holster. I'm going to put my email address at the end screen of this video because I don't like to publish it in text and in descriptions. But check the end screen, it'll show you my email, and if you'd like to have plans I've drawn up for making that holster, by all means, just fire me off an email and give me an ask, and no problem there. So I think that's all we're going to cover for today. It's been a fairly long video, but in the meantime, until we meet again and maybe respond to some new questions or ones that I've left out, I want to wish you all God bless and catch you next time. Did you like this video? If you did, I think you're going to like this one right over here. So check it out. And I appreciate your subscribing if you haven't done so already. Remember to do that while you're watching this next video. Click like, it all helps us out for this channel. Catch you next time.